In this video, I'm going to show you how you can export content from SceneForge Studio for use in other engines and software. There are many different types of content you can export, including videos, images, and 3D models. To start, I'm going to show you how we can take this timeline animation sequence, which has a camera motion, and export it to a video file. The first thing you want to do is make sure you're in shoot mode, and go over here and click Render Camera View. This opens up a menu that is very similar to the export menu from Premiere Pro. From the top down, we have an option to show the project's folder when complete. This is pretty helpful. We can also turn on and off Render Post Motion Blur. This actually renders motion blur in the exported video. Your results may vary with this. It all depends on what type of motion is in your scene. Next, you can choose the resolution, all the way up to 8K on supported hardware. For this, I'm going to stick with 720p. You can choose the frame rate. I'm going to leave it at 24. You can choose the encoder, which indicates the resulting file format. I'm going to leave it on H.264. And then you can choose the bitrate. Now, if you leave it at 0, it'll default to an automatic number, but I'm going to put it on 8000, which is typically a pretty good value for 720p footage. Now, before I click export, it's worth noting in the timeline options that you can specify the render start and end. These are options that exactly tell it at what point in seconds to start rendering or exporting and when to end. I can leave them at 0 to start at the 0 mark and leave the render end at 0 to end at the timeline's full duration. I always try to keep the timeline's duration to the length of the exported video, so I'm going to change the duration from 139 seconds to 15 seconds, shortening the timeline to only what I need. Now when I'm ready, I can click Render Camera View, set up my options, and click Export Timeline Video. Now this uses an offline render process to make sure each frame gets fully recorded before the next one moves on. So you can see a preview of this happening. It is going much slower than real time because it's making sure that everything is fully encoded. I'm going to pause the video and let this do its thing. When it's finished rendering, it'll open up your folder. It'll open up the video output folder within your project. So you can see inside your project folder we have video output. And you can see the video that we actually exported. You can see this is pretty high quality, very smooth with our motion blur being rendered. And it looks pretty good. Now there are other ways to record content for video. The next is changing the recording mode. Right now it's set to motion, meaning that when I press this recording button, it'll actually record the camera's motion to keyframes on the timeline. But I can also change it to video. This means that rather than recording keyframes, it'll actually record a video in real time while playing back the camera's motion. So now when I'm done recording that, it might take a second, but now if I open up the projects folder, go to video output, you'll see we have a third video that is the output of this timeline recorded in real time. Now you may notice that the footage is a little choppier. That's because this is being recorded in real time and doesn't give room for each frame to fully complete. So you may get dropped frames and the quality may not be as good. So keep that in mind when you're working with the system. You can also go to the Render Camera View, choose a resolution, and click Export PNG or EXR. Those will be individual frames of the camera's view at this point. And of course, every time you take a snapshot on the timeline, it saves that as an image in your image output folder for use on the storyboard system. Next, I'm going to show you how you can export storyboards. In storyboard mode, I'm going to create a rough storyboard here with various frames. Now for this example, I am using placeholder text. But you can see each frame has an image of the floor plan, the frame itself, the camera's information, and so on. So I can click Export Storyboard, and you can see we'll get a preview of that storyboard. I can choose various options about what to display. And when I'm ready, I can export as HTML, PDF, shot list, or line sheet. Now I'm going to click PDF for now and click Export. This may take a second depending on your content, but once it's complete, in your Storyboards folder inside your project, you'll see we'll get a nice, there we go, a nice storyboard as a PDF document with our frames. It is important to save your project before exporting the storyboard to make sure it has all the frame information. So you can see you have your shot number, name, floor plan, and all content here. This can also be exported as an HTML file for further editing. And a shot list is actually the same information, just exported as a CSV file, like so. So now we have our shot name, number, and all of that inside a Excel-like document. You even have a path to the image inside your project. And line sheet is a similar format, but for a list of all objects in the scene that you can use for production design. And that is exporting storyboards. The final way you can export content is using the library panel. You can click on the Import Export button, go down to Export Scene, and that'll open the Export Scene menu. The first thing you want to do is set a file name, so I'm going to do Scene 1, and you can set various options for your scene. You can choose whether or not to export the floor plan that gets generated from the floor plan editor. You can choose between none, so don't include it in the 3D scene, or only export that floor plan. I'm going to click Include for now. You can choose to export the light models. Because this gets saved as a GLTF, light objects, or the actual information about light information, does not get exported with it. So you can choose whether or not to export the actual 3D mesh representing this light. You can also choose to do the same for camera models, track models, and then the file format, so it can be GLTF plus a separate bin file with all the textures, or a GLB, which is everything including textures in one file. I'm going to click Export Scene, and this will take a second, and then finally in your Scene Exports folder, you'll see your GLB. And you can see if I open that up in the Windows 3D viewer, we have our floor plan with textures, our lights, our cameras, and other objects. And those are the three main ways you can export content from SceneForge Studio. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.